So last time we talked about money supply and money demand, and equilibrium in the money market determines the nominal interest rate, which is the opportunity cost of money. And we emphasize the trade-off between holding between liquidity and the return. Okay, so it's a trade-off between liquidity and return, and return is liquidity is valued for its sake of as a medium of exchange for the property, the function of money as a medium of exchange. Okay, so liquidity is important, but on the other hand, the interest rate, the nominal interest rate, will give you the return. So that trade-off to what? I mean, how much money you want to keep depends on the nominal interest rate. Because if the nominal interest rate is high, then you would have more incentive to put your money in the non-monetary assets and sacrifice your liquidity a little bit. So what it means is that you will have to, in order to pay, you have to incur more transaction costs. You have to go to the bank more often. You have to talk to your broker and liquidate your asset more often. And sometimes this involves risk. Okay? So for example, the bond, you're holding interest-bearing bond, right? If the interest rate is high for the bonds, then you want to keep more bond and less money. But if you want to you have to pay. In order to pay, then you have to go to the bank or to the broker to liquidate your bond into money and then pay other people, right? So that incurs transaction costs. Okay, so that is why there is such a trade-off, and why a high interest rate will entice people to hold more bonds and less money. Okay, is that clear? So, and that's why money, the opportunity cost of money is nominal interest rate. That's precisely for that reason. Okay, so and then we talked about you know, a lot of things about how monetary policies in different countries can affect the exchange rate, and we talked about the distinction between temporary change in money supply and permanent change in money supply. So we just talked about temporary last time, right? So we were going to talk about permanent change in money supply, but before that, I would like to digress a little bit into something else, which is about some pretty basics about the quantity theory of money. So I already stated in the slides that you should refer to this set of notes, and this set of notes is actually posted on Canvas, right? So let me see here. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, hello. Okay. Now. So, all right. All right. Okay. So I want to digress a little bit. This is actually some notes that is extracted from the book written by Gregory Mankiw, Macroeconomics. Okay. So this is to. So what we're going to talk about why I want to digress into this is to try to motivate a concept called classical dichotomy. Okay, and we're actually going to make use of this concept in this book. So classical dichotomy basically says that money is neutral in the long run. So money is neutral in the long run. Only neutral meaning what? Meaning that the real variables are not affected by money in the long run. Real variables will only be affected by real variables. So the real side of the economy will affect the real endogenous variables. Okay, in the long run. So that is one of the things that I want to motivate, want to discuss and justify based on this discussion here. Okay. So first of all, we're going to talk about the quantity theory of money. Okay, and then we talk about inflation and interest rate, and thirdly, we want to talk about classical dichotomy. So, what is the theory of money? Quantity theory of money. So, quantity theory of money is basically a theory that was put forward by Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman got the Nobel Prize in economics back in the, I guess, back in the early 1980s, I believe. So basically, his idea is that money and price level, money supply and the general price level has a very tight relationship with each other. Okay, so to understand this, we have to understand what is some very basic. Okay, so first of all, we talk about the transaction, what we call the transaction velocity of money versus the income velocity of money. So first of all, we have this transaction synchronous equation here. Money multiplied by velocity is equal to price times transactions. This quantity equation is an identity, and V is called the transaction velocity of money. And it's actually very intuitive. This MV is equal to PT is simply just some mathematical kind of identity, right? So just imagine in this economy, in each year, okay, in a hypothetical economy, in each year there are T transactions, okay, and then the price of each transaction is P. So you need, so in other words, the total amount of money that has to change hand in this year is equal to P times T, right? But suppose you only have M amount of money in the economy, then V, each dollar will have to change hand V times. Okay, if you have less money supply in this economy, then the money has to change hand more often. Okay. Okay. So we can think of the following. So in the economy, people buy bread every year. They buy and sell bread every year. So there are every year 100 loaves of bread will be sold, and each loaf of bread costs $10. Okay, so the total amount of transaction will be 100 times 10, which is 1,000. But the money supply is only, let's say, 10. Okay, you only have, or 100. Let's say the money supply is 100. Then the velocity of money is equal to 10. Okay, so the money has to change hand 10 times during this period. Because every time you have a transaction, the money will change hand from one person to another. Okay, so if you have so much money, only so much money around, then you have to, the V will tell you how many times the money have to change hand. Each dollar will have to change hand. Okay, so. Okay, so let's say this is 100, this is 10, and this is, let me see, I just say it is 100, right? So let's just use a different, more interesting number for it. For example, 50, 20, okay? So this is total amount of money that have to change hand each period, but you only have 50 units of money, so the money have to each unit of money will have to change hand 20 times during this period. So it's very, very simple kind of mathematics. But now we can sort of, because number of transactions is hard to kind of record. So, but the income or output of an economy is easy to measure, right? So, so therefore, people come up with what we call this income velocity of money. So instead of a transaction, you replace the t by y. Okay, it's kind of just a theory. It's an abstract. It's an abstraction. Okay, it's an abstraction of reality. So one can imagine that the number of transactions in the economy should be positively related to the income, okay, or output. If income is higher, then there should be more transaction, right? People consume more, they invest more, and therefore should be positively related. So as a result, you have this equation, but the V will have to be interpreted differently, and it's called the income velocity of money. So it's still a velocity of money, okay? So higher for the same amount of money, if income is higher, then the velocity of money has to be faster. And also, if price is higher, the general price level is higher, then for the same amount of money, the velocity of money also has to be higher. Money has to circulate and change hand more often. So this is the origin of the quantity theory of money. Basically, the quantity theory of money basically says that the velocity of money is constant. Okay, so the idea is that the velocity of money is constant, and that is what we call the quantity theory of money. So quantity theory of money basically sort of theorize that, or they make the assumption that the velocity of money is constant. So once we assume that velocity is constant, then the quantity equation can be seen as a theory. Okay, in fact, it can be seen as a theory of the nominal GDP, how the nominal GDP is determined. So basically, what it says is that a change in the quantity of money will cause a proportionate change in the nominal GDP. Now, given that y, this output, real output,
is determined by some real variables, right? Like what? The output, the real output of a country is determined by what? By some real things, right? Like the quantity of labor supplied, maybe the quantity of capital, right? The level of technology, okay? This kind of thing will determine the real output Y, right? So these things are non-monetary. They're not affected by money supply, okay? So given that this Y is independent of M, then any increase in M, given that V is constant, will actually lead to a proportionate increase in the price level. So money supply and price level would be proportionate to each other. Now, this is actually a kind of a, you can think of this as a long-run theory, okay? A theory that is kind of related to, is very much long run. So the idea that velocity is constant is also is a long-run theory, okay? Now you compare this quantity theory of money, this equation, with our equation. You remember what we have is what? We have MD is equal to P times L R Y, right? Remember? So that's not the same. So it's a little bit different, right? So in equilibrium, we say, okay, this is in equilibrium. This is the equilibrium. In equilibrium, in the money supply, in the money market, money supply is equal to money demand, but money demand is equal to this, and therefore in equilibrium, MS, or simply M, you know, is as MS over P is equal to L R Y, and this MS is simply just M here. It's just the M there. So what's the difference between this and that? Obviously, the difference is that we replace the Y. We replace the Y by so M over P is K times Y. So compare this with the KY. Okay, the K. Okay, that K is equal to just 1 over V, right? So. Right? So, and then this is a constant, right, according to the quantity theory. So you compare this, I'm asking you to compare this with this. So it's different from our equation, right? So how can we reconcile between the two? Well, what we can reconcile is that you cannot totally reconcile that because this is proportional to y, but this is a function of y and r. But then we do recognize this, right? This is positively related to y, so at least both this theory and our equation says that when y, you know, that the real money balance is positively related to y. So both our equation and that equation recognize that fact, except that that equation uses proportionality. So the y is actually proportional. But we in this case, the y is not proportional. It's positively related, but not exactly proportional. But we also recognize the fact that interest rate will have an effect on the real money balance in equilibrium. And it's not there. So how do we recognize that? Well, you can think of that this as I said, this is kind of like a long run. It's like a long run model. Okay, so it doesn't really. So in the long run, the interest rate, the nominal interest rate, will be just closely related to the real interest rate, and so in the long run, this nominal interest rate, you can argue, is is only determined by real variables. Okay, it's only determined by real variables. So if that's the case, then you can somehow kind of reconcile the two. But I think we're still going to adopt this model. Okay. So the reason why I talk about this is just to motivate the long-run neutrality of money. Okay. So as you can see that different authors will write out the money demand function in a slightly different way. Okay. But the basic idea is actually consistent with each other. Okay, so let me just move on with this. Okay, so just to stick to this view. Okay, that so this theory has three building blocks. So as I said, first of all, the output is determined by factor of production and a production function, meaning that production function is determined by the technology of the economy. Factor of production is the labor, capital kind of thing. So this is not determined by money. Money supply determines the nominal value of output. This conclusion follows from the quantity equation, right? And the assumption that the loss of money is fixed. Okay. So one more thing to sort of say that these two equations also both recognize that money and price are proportional to each other. Given the y, okay, and given the interest rate, as I said, in the long run should be only determined by the real factors. So the right hand side is the only determined by real factors. So in our theory, we also have the feature that M and P are actually proportional to each other in the long. If this right hand side is totally determined by real factors, then money and price should also be proportional to each other. So we're going to adopt this, and we're going to show that in the long run, this variable should be only determined by real factors, not monetary factors. So we also have this feature here. So the price level P is then the ratio. Well, this part is so basically M is proportional to P, given that Y is given the value of Y. Okay, and so therefore the nominal GNP or GDP or nominal income is proportional to M. So quantity implies the price less proportional to money supply. This is actually one of the most important conclusion from this quantity theory. And so this is nothing more than just taking the coming from that equation. So the main point here is that the quantity theory of money states that the central bank, which controls the money supply, has the ultimate control over the rate of inflation. Okay, so inflation is really determined by the amount of money. So Milton Friedman says that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. This is a very famous quote. Okay, and it's very powerful. Actually, it's a very powerful statement. And even today, even today, many central banks believe in that. Okay, many central banks believe in that. So inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. It's a very powerful statement. It's a very strong statement, actually. So let's think about some real-world situation. Some people say, oh, you know, inflation is, let's say, look at inflation in Hong Kong, let's say. So people talk about all sorts of reasons why inflation has become higher in recent years, because, oh, maybe the import prices have risen, you know, or that wages have risen. Okay, so therefore the cost of goods has increased, therefore the prices increase. Okay, so I mean, if you read the newspaper, people always talk about this. Okay, why inflation is higher in recent years? They put all this kind of reason. But if you ask Milton Friedman, he said nothing is important. The only thing that's important is the money supply. So there's no need to talk about why import prices have increased, why wages have increased. This is not important. The only reason why you have high inflation is just because money supply has increased. So why? Can it be reconciled with these other things that you observe? The answer is yes, actually, because you know, if the money supply doesn't change, there's no reason for price to increase. So sometimes people say, oh, because there's inflation, because because the currency has depreciated, so imports become more expensive. But a depreciation oftentimes is related to an increase in money supply. Okay, so this is a very deep point. Okay, that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Maybe as the course progresses, we can refer to this time and again. It's a very deep point. I'll be glad to discuss with you more about this in the rest of the course. So I really don't want to say too much about this at this point. But this is something that we will adhere to this view. Okay. So, for example, in the central bank, okay, when the central bankers try to control inflation, okay, one of the important mandates of the central bank is to try to control the level of inflation at a manageable level, right? So, what they do is that it's a strong belief that inflation, the level of inflation, the rate of inflation is determined, okay, price level, I should say. That price level is closely related to the money supply. Okay, it is coming from this, actually. Okay, so that's why when you say, okay, the Federal Reserve tries to I think you might have read in the news, right, that the Federal Reserve was considering any further rate cut in the future, right? So it cut the interest rate twice in a recent past, right? So what is the rationale being given? That about for example, some people resist cutting interest rate further in the future, because if you cut interest rate, that means that you increase the money supply. When you increase the money supply, that means the price level will rise, okay, according to this. So that would fuel inflation. It will trigger higher inflation if you cut interest rate, okay. So that is the idea, right? So it's coming from this kind of idea that interest rate, okay, this policy interest rate called the federal funds rate would affect the money supply in the economy, and therefore it would affect the price level, general price level, and that will affect inflation. So they worry about rising inflation. That's why they hesitate. Some people, at least some people in the Federal Reserve, hesitate to further cut interest rate, okay, because they worry about inflation. Okay, so. So the empirical fact that they allude to is actually this thing that they actually have lots of empirical evidence to support this that high money supply is often high rate of growth of money tend to be associated with very high rates of inflation. Low rate of growth of money tend to be associated with low inflation rate. This is actually a very strong evidence to show that. So this theory of inflation works best in the long run. Okay, as I said, just think about it as the long run, because in the short run, other things may comes in. For example, interest rate may affect the price level as well. So. Okay. Now the next thing is about inflation and interest rate. We'll talk about that, right? So we have the real interest rate versus the nominal interest rate. So the definition of real interest rate is nominal interest rate minus the rate of inflation. Right? So there's something called the Fisher effect. The Fisher effect is a theory which said, okay, so this this equation r is equal to I minus pi itself is actually a identity, okay. But then if you reinterpret it, it will become a theory. So this theory is called the Fisher effect. Okay, so so basically, what it says is that in the long run, the nominal interest rate, in the long run, the real interest rate is actually determined by real variables. Again, the distinction between real and nominal in the long run. So it's this idea that money in the long run is actually neutral. In the long run, money does not affect the real variable. So in the long run, money supply will not affect R. So it will only affect the nominal interest rates through pi. Okay? In the long run, rate of change of money growth, rate of change of money will affect pi, right? Just through the quantity theory of money, right? So if money growth is faster, then P will rise at a faster rate, and this faster rate will be that will be the rate of inflation pi. Okay, so in the long run, the increase in pi will affect the increase. Pi will affect I. Okay, in fact, it will be 1-for-1. Any 1% increase in the rate of inflation in turn causes a 1% increase in the nominal interest rate. So that is called the Fisher equation. So this Fisher equation basically is totally consistent with the quantity theory of money. Okay. That in the first of all is the it is that the rate of inflation is all caused by the rate of increase in money supply. And secondly, the real variable R is not affected by money in the long run. So the one-for-one relationship between inflation rate and nominal interest rate is called the Fisher effect. So the idea is that, in fact there are two real interest rates. One is called ex ante real interest rate, and the other is called exposed real interest rate. So what is ex ante? Ex ante is that ex ante real interest rate is actually the real interest rate that we usually talk about. The inflation is the expected rate of inflation, because we don't know what the inflation is going to be in the next period. Okay, so we can only have an expectation of what the inflation is going to be in the next period. And therefore, when we try to figure out what is the real interest rate today, you see, we need to use the ex ante real interest rate, because we're trying to figure out what is the real interest rate for my investment today. But I don't know the inflation in the next period, so my return will come only next period, right? My return will come only next period, but I don't know the inflation next period. I can only expect it. So that's why when we talk about real interest rate, usually we mean ex ante real interest rate. But there is also the concept of exposed real interest rate, which is actually what sometimes people call the realized real interest rate, because that is after the fact. Okay, so by next year you will know what is your exposed real interest rate. Today you know your ex ante real interest rate based on your pi e, but by next year you will know what your exposed real interest rate is. Okay. So that's a distinction between the two. But usually we'll use the first one. We'll use the ex ante real interest rate. So that so in other words, the Fisher effect is more precisely written as that, because we're using the ex ante real interest rate. The ex ante real interest rate R is determined by equilibrium market of goods and services. So in the long run, this is independent of money. Okay, but this is affected by money, by the growth rate of money, according to the quantity equation of money. So that's why there's a one-for-one relationship between inflation, or expected rate of inflation, and the nominal interest rate. Okay. All right. So this is a lot of history, basically. Okay. So Milton Friedman, in fact, Fisher was actually even before Milton Friedman. Okay. Irving Fisher was actually before Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman, in some senses, inherits this kind of this view, and this view can also be expressed in as something called a classical dichotomy. We call it classical dichotomy. So basically, we distinguish between real variables and nominal variables. According to the classical dichotomy, the real variables are only affected by real variables. Okay, so what are the real variables? So real variables would be like quantities of goods or quantities of services, that kind of thing. Okay, the real stuff, and also relative prices. Not nominal prices, not the price of single good, but the relative prices. Okay, So the relative price, let's say, what do we mean by that? So what we mean by it is like apple, orange, shoes, houses, all these kind of things. Well, the relative prices would be like the relative price of orange to apple, the relative price of apple to shoes. Okay, all these things are relative prices, and these are real variables. They are real variables. The quantities of apple, orange, all these are quantities. So these are all variable, real variables. So the irrelevance of money for real variables is called the monetary neutrality. And people believe that in the long run, money is neutral. Money would not affect these real variables in the long run. So we're going to adopt that, actually. In this course, we're going to adopt this view that money is neutral in the long run. When everything, when the market is settled, okay, in the long run, especially the price level. So the distinction between long run and short run is the price level. Whether the price level is totally flexible or sticky. In the short run, price is sticky, okay? But in the long run, price is totally flexible to change, okay? So when price is totally flexible to change, then money is neutral, according to this view. And what it means is that money will have no effect on the real variables, such as quantities and relative prices. But monetary neutrality does not fully describe the world in which we live, because, especially because, short-run fluctuations. But the reason why this is so is because in the short run, the price is sticky. That's the main reason. Okay? Is that clear? Let me just pause a little bit to see whether you have any questions. So this is a little bit of a digression. Do you have any question about this whole thing, about this classical dichotomy, long-run neutrality of money? Okay. So this is actually quite consistent with our framework. Actually, even if you don't have to believe in this equation, okay? We'll come back to our model, but we still. What's common is that money is not going to affect this y, okay? And in the long run, the nominal interest rate, you see the nominal interest rate is equal to R plus pi e, right? So so if pi, let's say suppose m is constant. If m is constant, then pi e will be equal to what? Can anyone tell me? So let me just ask you this question. So make sure you understand this. So, okay, can you go back to, we go back to this equation, right? According to this quantity of money, right? Can you tell me, according to this quantity of money, if m is constant, what is pi e? Anybody? Suppose we're in an economy in a steady state. The economy is in a steady state where m is constant. Yeah, absolutely. Pi is 0. Okay? So in our course, oftentimes we just deal with a situation where in the long run, m is just a constant. Okay? So therefore, pi is equal to 0, and so I is equal to R in the long run when m is constant. And therefore, I is neutral with respect to money, right? And this I is actually our R, okay? Our capital R is just the I, okay? So therefore, in the long run, you know, suppose the money, let's say, suppose that's a permanent increase in money supply by 10%, let's say, okay? Permanent increase in money by 10%. And then it stays there. It just stays there after the 10% increase. So what would be the long run effect of that one-time permanent 10% increase in money supply? Well, first of all, that long run effect would not affect this R because Y is going to be 0 in the long run, and R is going to be just the real interest rate, and the real interest rate is determined by real variables. Okay. So, and also Y in the long run, Y is also not going to be determined by money. So in the long run, this guy is going to be unchanged. You see? And therefore, you have this dichotomy. You see, we already have a what we call the classical dichotomy there, where the nominal variable is affected by money, but the real variables are affected by just the real variables. Okay, so it's this thing that so in other words, you have this M, this equal P times this L R Y. So in the long run, you know, if M increases, P is going to increase, but this is going to be constant in the long run. Okay, as long as this is purely, if it's a purely monetary shock, if the shock is purely monetary, and 10% increase in money will lead to a 10% increase in the price level in the long run, with this being unchanged. If the shock is purely monetary, you see, that is our application of the classical dichotomy. Does that make sense? All right. Okay. So very good. All right. That's my digression. Any other questions? If no question, I'll go back to the slides to continue. Okay. I strongly encourage you to not just study this set of notes, but also, you know, that you know, I have posted this as well on Canvas, right? So this is chapter 6 of that textbook. You should read this. You should read all these pages. There are not that many pages. You just read the ones that I cover in the notes that I just discussed. In fact, this actually has a diagram which shows that the money supply growth and inflation are positively related. We also have a similar diagram actually in our slides actually. So here you can see there is very strong empirical evidence to support the view that the growth of money supply and inflation rate, which is the growth rate of P, are very strongly correlated and positively correlated. In fact, you may even say that it is almost like a 45-degree line. Okay, so 45-degree line is important because this is what the theory, the quantitative theory of money basically says, that it should be lying on a 45-degree line. Okay, and it seems to be quite close to the 45-degree line as well. See, so
So money, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Very powerful theory, very powerful statement, which we use a lot. So please read this also. Now I'm going to come back to our slides here. Let's see. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, so long run and short run. Okay. So now we're going to talk about a permanent one-time increase in money supply. Now, so remember last time we talked about a temporary, right? So what is temporary? What's the difference between temporary and permanent? Permanent means is that money supply is going to just stay there at that level forever. Right? So that's permanent. Let's see. So what is going to happen if we have a permanent instead of a temporary? So can anybody tell me, in principle, how is a permanent increase in money supply different from a temporary increase in money supply in a model? Okay, in a model. So you remember we have this model, right? So we have this. So last time, I just want to recap what we've done, right? So last time, you remember we had this temporary increase in money supply in the U.S., right? How does it affect the exchange rate, right? So we say, okay, there's a temporary increase in money supply in the U.S. It will shift this curve because M1 increases to M1 increases to M2. The M increases from M1 to M2, and then the price level of the U.S. is unchanged because it's we're talking about the short run, right? So and this short only lasts for one period anyway, so there is no distinction between short run and long run. Okay, when we talk about a temporary increase in money supply, there's no distinction between short run and long run because in the next period the money supply is going to decrease back to the original level. So nothing happened after one period. Okay, so just one period, just a one period thing. So what happened to this period when the money supply temporarily increased? So this is the thought experiment here, right? So this is what happened. This increases, shift the interest rate in the U.S. decreases, and as a result, the U.S. dollar depreciates, right? So now let me ask you one thing. That's exactly my question. My question is, suppose we have a permanent increase in money supply instead of temporary. How is it going to affect this diagram? Is this diagram going to change? In what way this diagram is going to change? Anybody? In what way is this diagram going to be different if it's a permanent instead of temporary? Okay. So remember this. What is this? What does this green curve represent? This green curve represents the expected euro return. What is that? Do you remember what is that equation? What is that? What's the equation for that green curve? What is the equation for a green curve? Anybody?
Interest rate on euros
Interest rate on euros?
plus expected exchange rate minus exchange rate over exchange rate.
Right. That's the green curve, right? So that's the green curve, suppose this is
permanent increase in money supply in the US, is it going to affect this expression? The green curve. What about the red curve? The red curve is money demand, right? So the red curve is MD over P is equal to L R Y. Okay? All right?
Would change EE.
You change EE.
Change in money, permanent effective money supply would change.
It will change EE. Why? Why change? Why EE will change?
Because in the future, you still expect there to be more currency.
Okay, so is it going to increase EE or decrease EE?
And increase in money supply would decrease EE.
A permanent increase in U.S. money supply will decrease EE.
I think so.
Why? Okay, first of all, why EE is affected? Can you say it one more time?
Because you have more money in the market now, so there's more supply, so like the price will drop. Right?
What price in the U.S.? Is that what you mean?
Price of US currency.
Well, the price of U.S. currency will drop. The value of U.S. currency will drop. So okay, but what happened to the price level? What happened to the price level in the U.S. in the long run? If there is a permanent, let's say a permanent one-time increase in money supply, in the 10% increase, let's say be more concrete, 10% increase, let's say.
Price level increase proportionally.
So price level in the U.S. will increase by 10% in the long run, right? In the long run, according to our theory, right? So what is that effect on the exchange rate of the U.S. dollar if the price level increases by 10% in the U.S. but unchanged in Europe?
The expected rate, do you expect that the future is going to depreciate with that 10%? Or?
Why? Why do you expect the U.S. dollar to depreciate by 10%? Well, for what reason?
You should be able to buy the same amount of stuff using the same amount of euros.
You should be able to buy the same amount of stuff using the same amount of euro.
So the price level increased by 10%, so the exchange rate should.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Yes, this is what I'm looking for. So this is something called purchasing power parity, which we have not talked about, but essentially the same amount of euro should be able to buy the same amount of goods before and after the shock.
But why is that actually?
Well, the reason is otherwise you would there may be arbitrage or something like that. You say that the same. So the purchasing power is basically you can buy the same goods. The purchasing power of €1 should not be affected. Okay, the purchasing power of €1 in the U.S. market should not be affected by the monetary factors, by monetary shock. Okay, otherwise there may be some arbitrage or something that happens in the real side of the economy. Because nothing happens in the real side, right? We already said that. Nothing should happen in the real side. So therefore, it should not affect the purchasing power of a euro in buying U.S. goods, right? Because the purchasing power of euro in buying European goods is unchanged, definitely, right? in this case, the purchasing power of €1 in buying European goods is unchanged. So therefore, the purchasing power of €1 in buying American goods should also be unchanged, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense, right? The real side of the economy is not affected, right? Okay? The relative price, in some sense, the relative price of European goods versus the price of American goods should be unchanged. Because we just said that relative prices are real. You see? So it should not be affected, right? Therefore, you're right. That the implication is that there must be a depreciation of US dollar, so that the purchasing power of each euro in buying American goods is just the same. You see? That's the long run neutrality of money. Okay? So you're right. So as a result, actually, both of you are right that this EE, well, by the way, is going to increase actually in our convention, by our convention. If there's a 10% increase in money in P of the US, then this E will also increase by 10%. So as a result, in the long run, MUS will increase by 10%, PUS will increase by 10%, and EU will also increase by 10%. So that's the idea, right? That's the totally consistent with our long-run neutrality of money, classical dichotomy, this kind of ideas. Does that make sense? Right? Okay, so if this is going to change by 10% in the long run, in fact, it is not in the long run. This will change by 10%. It doesn't have to be long run, okay? You have to be very careful here. Because the long run change, when the long run, the exchange rate is going to depreciate by 10%, means that the EE will increase by 10% immediately. Because it's an expectation. An expectation doesn't have to wait. Okay? The expectation, it will change immediately. So this will increase by 10% immediately. You see? So what happened? Well, in that case, what happened to the green curve? If it's a permanent increase, what happened to the green curve? It will shift to the right, right? Because EE increased, right? So that is the thing. That's the main thing. The EE will, the green curve will shift to the right. So as a result, what will happen? At least in the short run. Okay, in the short run, this shifts down, right? And this green curve shifts to the right. What happened? So what happens is that the US interest rate will fall, but the US dollar would what? Depreciate or appreciate? If green curve shifts to the right and this yellow curve shifts to the left, green curve shifts to the right, what happened? What happened to the E? Yellow curve shifts to the left, that's just the same. The only difference is that the green curve will shift to the right, so the E will go up even more. Even more. It will go up even more. So the US dollar will actually depreciate even more than a temporary increase. A permanent increase will lead to a even more drastic depreciation of the dollar. But this is not the end of the story. Because what? Because what?
The price of US dollar will decrease eventually.
The price of, in fact, it should be the price level, the general price level, the general price level of the US, the prices of goods and services, actually, is the P. The P will increase. Because there's a distinction between short run and long run now. Because this is a permanent increase. Because in the short run, P is sticky. So P is unchanged. But in the long run, your P is allowed to change, right? In the long run, P is supposed to be perfectly flexible. In this case, we expect that according to our quantity of money, in the long run, the price will increase by 10%, right? But this adjustment needs time. This adjustment needs time. So that's why there's a distinction between short and long run. Short run means price doesn't change. Price is sticky. But in the long run, price is totally flexible. That's the distinction between short and long run. So once you have that, that's not the end of what we just said is not the end of the story, right? So the price P is going to adjust. When the price P adjusts, what happened? What happened to this curve? This curve, first of all, is shift down because of the increased money supply, but price will rise gradually. So it will shift this curve back up, right? It will shift it back up. And as a result, what happened to the interest rate in the US? It will actually gradually increase. Okay, it will, that's an adjustment. It will just gradually increase back to this level. Back to, see, the difference is, the interesting thing is we're back to the original level. Why? Because, long run neutrality of money. You increase the M over P should be just unchanged in the long run, right? Because this right-hand side is unaffected by monetary effect. This is a purely monetary shock. So this is unaffected by monetary shock. So it's just go back to the original level. See? So that's why this curve will gradually shift back, and if you shift back to this same level as before, then the interest rate should also go back to the same old level, right? But there's also some adjustment in the exchange rate as well, okay? So now, in order to make it easier, let's go to this diagram, okay? Now this is the diagram. This is the diagram that will when there's a permanent increase in money supply. Okay. As I said, this is a short run. This was short run. This shifts down, right? And then you just told me that the green curve shifts to the right, okay? And so the equilibrium would be, the interest rate will be R2, and the exchange rate now would become E2 there, okay? It would become E2, E2. So the equilibrium is at the point 2 prime, right? But as I said, this is not the end of the story. This is just a short run situation because the P doesn't adjust. It's still P1. You start with P1, right? So what's the long run adjustment? The long run adjustment is like that. The long run adjustment is that the price is going to gradually increase, right? Because you have to adjust to the long run situation. In the long run situation, the money and price will both rise proportionate to each other. So M over P will be unchanged. It will go back to the original level. Okay? Is that clear? Because of the this quantity theory, right? So so this curve will shift back up and to intersect the money supply curve, money demand curve at exactly the same R1, the original level, what we call the long run level, steady state. The reason why, now what about this money demand curve? The money demand curve doesn't shift because as long as Y doesn't change, the money demand curve doesn't change. You see? Nothing happened to Y, right? This is a purely monetary shock. Now, okay, what is motion? what is actually really interesting is the adjustment in the exchange rate. So remember, in the short run, the exchange rate, depreciate to E2, right? But then the adjustment from short run to long run, as the price gradually rises, what happened is that the interest rate gradually rises from R2 to R1, and therefore, in the foreign exchange market, that leads to a US dollar what? Appreciation or depreciation? Huh? Appreciation. It will lead to an appreciation. So in the short run, you have a depreciation, but then gradually there's an appreciation. Okay? So this is what we call overshooting. Okay? Because in the short run, you shoot, but you overshoot. So therefore, in the long run, you have to adjust back. That's why it's called overshooting. So lots of things happening. Lots of things happening.
What is the net effect of overall depreciation or appreciation?
Oh, it's definitely a depreciation. It's, yeah, because the E will be 10% higher. Just according to our theory, that's what will happen, right? It will, in the long run, the E will be 10% higher, as you just said, right? So because of purchasing power parity, the exchange rate must depreciate by 10%, so that the purchasing power of each euro for American goods will remain the same. The relative price between European goods and American goods must remain the same, because this is a real variable and it is unaffected by monetary shock, right? So get back to the long, you'll get to the long run. You'll get to the long run eventually. Does it make sense? Does it make sense? All right. So here it says, so as prices increase, the real money supply decreases, and the domestic interest rate returns to its long run rate. You see? So in the previous diagram, what does it say? So first of all, you change an expected return euro deposit from there because the EE has increased. And secondly, here the expected return on euro deposit rises because of inflationary expectations. Because of inflationary expectations. The dollar is expected to be less valuable when buying goods and services and less valuable when buying euros. Okay? The dollar is expected to depreciate, increasing return deposit. So the EE is, will rise as a result of this expectation. So in a sense, you may think that, okay, so the reason why E rises is because of inflation expectation, because people expect the PUS to rise by 10% in the long run. But when that happens, the purchasing power of euro on American goods have to be restored by a 10% depreciation of the US dollar. So that's why people will expect the future exchange rate of the US to depreciate by 10% as well. So that's why EE will rise by 10%. So these are expectations. It will change immediately. Okay? Does it make sense? Okay, so now, okay, so how do we summarize all these things? So it's summarized by these four diagrams. Okay, it's a permanent increase in the U.S. money supply. So first of all, in the diagram, panel A, is simply just the thought experiment. Okay, so the money supply increases from M1 to M2 at the time T0. Okay. You actually should we should actually say that this is a unexpected increase, unanticipated increase. it is not announced. Okay, so it's not announced. So just unanticipated is just, it's not pre-announced. Put it this way, it's not pre-announced. It's announced at the same time when it is implemented. Now, announcement actually has some effect, I can tell you. There's a distinction between announcement and implementation. If you just announce and not implement yet, that's different from announcing it and implement it at the same time. You know why? So when announce it, the expectation already changed. But the actual implementation hasn't done yet, hasn't been done, therefore the M doesn't change. You see, the M still doesn't change. If you announce it and not implement it right away, people already form the expectation, but the M hasn't changed. So that curve will not shift down. I mean, the M, the curve shifts down only when M actually you know, this curve shifts down because M has increased from M1 to M2. The green curve shifts to the right because of the announcement. You see, so the two things can be separated. You can announce it without increasing it yet. Then it will shift to the curve to the right, but this curve doesn't shift down. So the difference, there's some difference here. You see, I think this is a good question for midterm. So you go and think about it. Okay, so I announce it and not implement it yet. So what happened? You know. So here we are assuming that you announce and implement at the same time, and so this is the thing. Okay, this is the money supply change. Now B tells you the nominal interest rate, right? It shifts down. It falls immediately because of increase in money supply. But then it will, as the price gradually rises, the interest rate also rises back to the long-run level. You see, the price level will rise gradually, right? Because of the increase in money supply. This is a permanent increase. The most interesting thing happens in the exchange rate. This is what we call exchange rate overshooting. Because you originally at this level, and when the money supply is announced and implemented, it will shift. It will overshoot to this level because the price level doesn't adjust immediately. So it shifts to this level. But then, as the price level gradually increases, the exchange rate will appreciate back to the long-run level. So there's still a depreciation, but in the long run there's still a depreciation from E1 to E3, but there is an overshooting in the short run to E2. Okay, is that clear? Does that make sense? Yeah. So the overshooting. So can anybody tell me what caused the overshooting? What caused the overshooting? What's the intuition? Why is there overshooting? Yeah.
The permanent change in money supply creates an expectation that's going to
It creates an expectation. So you mean it affects this thing, and therefore there is overshooting?
You expect it to be coming, but it's not coming yet.
That what?
You expect it to
It's not coming yet. But why is it not coming yet?
Because the price levels are sticky.
That's right. The price level is sticky. So it's not coming yet because the price level is sticky. The price level doesn't adjust immediately. It's not. It has not come yet. I mean, this. I like this way of presenting it. So it's not come yet. But why has it not come yet? It's because the price level is sticky. If the price level was not sticky, that would not be overshooting. Because there's no such thing as not come yet. Because the short run is just the long run. The distinction between short and long run is because the price level hasn't adjusted. You see? So, basically that's it. I think I should stop now. I'll continue. I'll continue next time. I think you can start looking at problem set 2, the first 3 questions. Okay. I believe you should be able to answer. I believe you should be able to answer most of the questions in the question 1 to 3 of problem set 2. Okay. All right. So I'll have a good weekend. I'll see you next week. Yes.